Well, the Houthis are back at it. They just sunk 2 ships in 2 days in the Red Sea, and this most recent one came with casualties. We're talking about at least 4 crew members killed and quite a few more still missing. Now, the Houthis in Yemen, they've not stopped. They did slow down operations for a period of time, but they've ramped it up significantly just this week. Now, the Magic Seas was hit, I believe, on Monday, and then on Tuesday, the Eternity Sea. And we have footage from each one of these. I'll start by showing some of the clips of the Magic Seas. This is one where the Houthis were able to board the ship. Fortunately, in this case, now both of these being Greek-owned ships, the first one, fortunately, the crew was able to evacuate after it was hit, and it doesn't appear that any of the crew members were killed, injured, or even captured, that they were picked up by other vessels in the area. The Eternity Sea, not so lucky. And again, we'll play some footage of the Eternity Sea being targeted. In both of these cases, targeted by drones and missiles from Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen. The Houthis in this case, with the Magic Seas, they didn't show the actual launches, but with the Eternity Sea, they did show some of their land-based systems launching to strike and the actual impacts against the Eternity Sea. And something I want to stress, as you see those detonations, these are civilian commercial vessels with no means to defend themselves against military strikes, like missiles and drones, like you're seeing here. And clearly some pretty significant damage to the Magic Seas, which you can see hitting the crew compartment there. Pretty understandable how casualties were caused as a result of this most recent attack. Now, I'll keep this one playing because we see the Magic Seas actually start to sink. A little bit of the Eternity Sea, a little bit different from the clip yesterday of the Magic Seas, where the Houthis placed explosive charges all along the side and watched the thing sink and then kind of celebrated it, which is a key note here. The Houthis are celebrating this. They are proud of this. They are not trying to hide their involvement in these strikes. They are coming out with statements saying, yeah, we did it. Here's the footage, and they're confirming, celebrating, bragging about these attacks. They, in a couple statements earlier today, said some shipping companies began violating the ban and shipping to the Israeli port, ignoring the ban and under the illusion that this can be overlooked. The naval operations, which sank 2 ships belonging to the violating companies, confirmed the firm stance of banning navigation against the Israeli enemy as long as the aggression and blockade on Gaza continues. And that has been a standard theme from the Houthis from when this all began, is they have said they are going to continue a blockade of any ships moving to or from Israel so long as the blockade of the Gaza Strip continues and humanitarian aid is not allowed to flow in. Now, there have been some periods of time where we've seen the Houthis lay off of these attacks, at least against commercial vessels, starting this last December 2024, which notably was the last time a commercial vessel was targeted by the Houthis. They actually, at that time, stopped hitting commercial vessels and kind of focused all of their energy on U.S. military assets in the region. So we saw a continuation of back and forth strikes against the naval vessels in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. And of course, during that time period, we saw the United States carrying out strikes in Yemen as well. That corresponded with an Israel and Hamas ceasefire. And it seemed like Yemen, to a degree, was kind of going along with that. As soon as that ceasefire fell apart, we definitely saw an increase of Houthi attacks against U.S. warships. But that's largely been, military on military, largely been what we've seen from the Houthis for the past 7 months or so at this point. From December until May, notably picked up in February, we saw an increase in U.S. military strikes against the Houthis under President Trump and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. They really ramped up the volume of strikes day in and day out and went more in an offensive type pattern rather than what we saw under the Biden administration, which tended to be a lot more defensive and preemptive type strikes. Like the Houthis we had constant overhead coverage with drones and manned aircraft. And when they would move a missile or a drone out to a launch location, it would come under fire from U.S. assets. For a long time, that's what we saw from the Biden administration. So reactionary in a lot of ways. That shifted under President Trump and Secretary Hegseth, where the U.S. really took the fight more to the Houthis. We hit command and control facilities. We hit weapon storage facilities, launch site, radars locations, really expanded the target grouping. However, there's not a lot of evidence that those were super successful. Yes, we dropped a lot of munitions on the Houthis, but anybody who's studied military history knows the number of munitions dropped or the number of targets engaged is not a very good metric for success. And what we've seen is during the course of those strikes carried out by the United States, the Houthis were regularly and consistently firing missiles and drones at U.S. warships. That's a side of this that we really didn't have a lot of information on. The DoD has not still put out information as to the interceptions required by our forces against those Houthi munitions, but a couple times a day, the Houthis would announce carrying out launches against the U.S. military. In May, that came to a halt with a kind of abrupt ceasefire announced between the United States and the Houthis. Strangely enough, as Israeli Air Force had jets in the sky carrying out one of their mini strikes against Houthi targets. Since then, U.S. flagged ships and the Houthis have not been engaging each other back and forth at all. It's stopped. Now, this entire time, the Houthis, and again yesterday, they have continued their strikes against Israel just about nonstop, not quite every day, but pretty consistently. Just yesterday, they said they fired a couple more ballistic missiles at Israel. According to the Houthis, they say air raid sirens in Israel rang across 300 towns and cities, sending millions of Zionists rushing to shelters and halting air traffic at the airport. From Israel, it does sound like those missiles or that missile were successfully intercepted outside of Israeli airspace, which has generally been the theme. I think only a couple Houthi missiles at this point have actually penetrated Israeli airspace. Nonetheless, that aspect of this fight has never stopped. We continue to see the Houthis trying to engage any number of targets inside of Israel, but the U.S. Houthi fight has stopped. Now, we haven't withdrawn forces from the region. In fact, just the other day, we got news that, again, we have 2 aircraft carriers or carrier strike groups operating in the Middle East. So we still have essentially the same, if not more, firepower there, able to take on the Houthis. But we have not seen a resumption in U.S. hostilities against targets in Yemen. Even with these 2 strikes, there doesn't appear to be anything on the agenda. The United States, by and large, has not really addressed this. Our State Department says we don't like it. Please release the hostages. It sounds like the Houthis may have taken a couple of these crew members prisoner. Not sure if that was the initial attack against the Magic Seas or the second attack against the Eternity Sea. But we, of course, issued our strongly worded statement. It's what governments do first, right? You got to get those harsh words out there before you do anything else. Not clear if that's where we're going to stop or if we plan on following through with any additional military action. I should note that ceasefire between the Houthis and the United States was bilateral, as in it was a U.S. Houthi ceasefire. So the minute they started firing missiles at Israel, technically that was outside the purview of what we agreed to. And technically, as they sink Greek-owned ships day after day in the Red Sea and kill some of their sailors, that is technically outside the purview of this U.S. Houthi ceasefire. However, a big argument that the United States has made around our involvement in this region at all is ensuring the freedom of navigation. It's a major shipping route moving through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait right off the coast of Houthi-controlled Yemen territory, and they have found a pretty effective way of shutting down or depressing shipping to pretty significant lows. I think the last I saw was current shipping is only 60% of the regular levels prior to this series of attacks. This series of attacks going back to, November 2023, when the Houthis first struck a commercial vessel. And the issue here is that the Houthis don't actually have to sink anything. In the last couple of days, we've seen that they are able to, and they've kind of hit these ships with multiple munitions, albeit the first one looks like they just disabled and then attached some explosive charges to sink it. They don't actually have to sink these vessels. They don't actually have to kill anybody. They just have to fire one drone every so often in the general vicinity of a commercial vessel, and these shipping companies are not going to risk it. The insurance companies aren't going to underwrite it, and you're going to see what we have seen for the last year or more now, where even as the attacks again, or definitely the last 7 months, right, saying the last attack in December 2024, well, if that was the last time, at some point in here, you would think that commercial vessels would say, I guess it's safe to go on and move through, and plenty have been. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait has rarely been completely closed. It's been for short periods of time as the U.S. and the Houthis have been engaging fire, or been trading fire, but it's never been completely shut off for any significant duration. So every single day, there have been ships moving through. The problem is every one of those ships is kind of rolling the dice. Because in this case, the Houthis are saying, well, these were Israeli ships. No, they were Greek ships. And they've done this before. Their targeting is not the most accurate. They're relatively accurate in hitting ships. But in terms of the ownership of those ships, where those ships are coming from or going to, in the past, they've hit ships that were in the process of delivering aid from like Europe to Yemen, and they attacked it. Like no Israeli connections, no U.S. connections at all. In fact, it was aid to support the people of Yemen that badly need it, and they've hit those ships before. They hit a Chinese ship at one point carrying Russian oil. So it's relatively haphazard when it comes to their targeting. But what the Houthis have shown, and this is something to keep in mind when you look up at the Gulf of Hormuz or the Strait of Hormuz off the coast of Iran, is you don't actually need to physically shut down the entire waterway. You just have to have a good portion of it within range of your drones. And these long-range Shahed-style drones no doubt can range the entire thing. So the Houthis have shown that a terrorist organization with limited control of physical territory can shut down a major waterway. And a concern I have right now is the United States is kind of watching this play out, and it doesn't look like we're going to step in and try to intervene this time around. That might set the stage for the Houthis, Iran, or someone else anywhere around the world to get the message that you can wait us out so long as it's not in the United States. And again, it doesn't take physical boats. It doesn't take actually mining the entire sea lane. And there's not a lot of pushback when innocent civilian sailors are killed. You would think there would be more uproar about this. We got 2 ships sunk in 2 days with at least 4 people killed. You'd think there would be more of an international response to say, hey, this isn't okay. We need to step in. We need to put this to an end. And not just make sure the Houthis open up this corridor, but make sure they never think about doing this again. That doesn't seem like it's on the top of anyone's radar right now. It seems like everybody at the very least has a different priority. So what we can expect in Yemen is for these attacks to continue. No doubt to continue against Israel, as the Houthis have said that will continue until the siege of Gaza is lifted. And there's no indications, we're going to move on to Gaza here in a moment, no indications that a ceasefire is anywhere near materializing. So expect the Houthi attacks against Israel to keep going. But again, we're watching the Houthis get away with whatever they want in the Red Sea. And to be fair, it's not as simple as just throwing some airstrikes their way. We've had a lot of firepower in the region and have not been able to successfully deter the Houthis from carrying out these operations with airstrikes alone. It's going to take a lot more. It's going to take probably a stable Yemen. And there was some talk probably 5 or 6 months ago about the possibility of the United States maybe backing a local movement, because remember, the Houthis are not the Yemeni government. The Houthis control territory in western Yemen, and there still is the Republic of Yemen. That civil war is generally on ice. And there was talk 5 or 6 months ago about maybe the United States and some of our Middle Eastern allies could possibly support the other side to try to help push the Houthis out of power. Because so long as they're there and they have these munitions, largely provided by Iran, they're going to continue to pose a threat to international shipping. And again, no indications that's going to stop anytime soon. Now, shifting up to the Gaza Strip, there's been a noticeable increase in Hamas attacks in recent days. Just a couple days ago, we had the complex attack where Hamas, and we got confirmation from Israel that 5 of their soldiers were killed, at least 14 wounded, as Hamas opened fire on a column that was moving into Beit Hanun in the northern portion of the Gaza Strip. A Hamas-affiliated channel released this clip that I'm going to play here, saying it's from that attack. I've only seen this released once, and I've only seen it on that one channel, so I'm not entirely certain. And of course, grainy footage, it makes it look like the soldiers in this case are already under direct fire, which when looking at that attack, the way that it was relayed from the IDF was, and it matches for a sense here, it was that dismounted troops were moving alongside armored vehicles moving through Beit Hanun, standard IDF, standard military tactic, and explosive charges went off like IEDs, and that killed or wounded some soldiers. And then as they were in the process of evacuating those soldiers from the kill zone, Hamas opened fire, and all of a sudden you had you can see somebody there. It appears to be somebody dragging a casualty out of harm's way. So the complex ambush piece would have been the explosion going off and then the gunfire coming after. This clip, I didn't see any explosions in. So, and when it starts, you can see the soldiers aren't quite yet in panic mode or fight or flight mode type thing, where and they're not returning fire at the very beginning. So it looks like this is where Hamas began firing, but we don't see that explosion that the IDF talked about earlier. So maybe, also notably, haven't seen anything like this put out on actual Hamas channels in recent days. You have to assume that if Hamas has this footage, they're going to share it, because in the immediate aftermath of this announcement, which was confirmed by Israel like the night of, like reports started trickling in, and the IDF very, very quickly said, yes, we have casualties, stand by for information. And within like within 6 hours, just enough time for the families to be notified, we started to see confirmation of the unit, the location, the names, the ranks, and the details of the engagement. Now, it's still under investigation from the IDF. Anytime there's a large number of casualties like that, so we should expect more information to come out. But from the Hamas side, that's all we really have seen at this point. That and a bunch of propaganda posters that they were circulating in the immediate aftermath, just kind of celebrating this attack. And we're seeing that kind of continue in recent days. So the Qassam brigades, the militant arm or the militant wing of Hamas, put out a statement saying that they were able to raid a gathering of IDF soldiers and vehicles in Khan Yunis on Wednesday morning. They said that they targeted a tank and 2 Israeli armored vehicles. They said they targeted 2 more excavators, and they advanced towards enemy soldiers and engaged them with light weapons. They said they tried, in this case, to capture Israeli soldiers, which all of a sudden, kind of out of nowhere, Hamas is talking a lot more about that in recent days. And this was generally supported by some statements coming out of Israel saying that it does appear that a soldier that was killed on one of these excavators, that Hamas had climbed onto the vehicle and was trying to capture him when he was run off by other IDF soldiers. Hamas says they attempted to capture one of the soldiers, but field conditions did not permit this, so they killed him and seized the weapon. Again, Hamas is continuing to say that they are going to continue focusing on capturing Israeli soldiers. And they just put out a statement earlier today calling on their elements in the West Bank to rise up and begin fighting even harder. They said, quote, "We call on our heroic youth to escalate the resistance in all areas of the West Bank and Jerusalem, and to rise up against the aggressors to deter them from continuing their crimes and from moving forward with a plan to annex the West Bank before what remains of Palestine is lost to our people." We're going to shift over to IDF operations here in a moment, which is taking form in a couple different ways. But notably, again, we saw for quite a while here, for a couple months, it was a lot of booby traps. It was a lot of tunnel entrances with mines. It was a lot of kind of IDF soldiers being lured into buildings and tunnels with explosive charges then going off. A lot of that for a period of time. It looks like in the past, say, 72 hours, the IDF has all of a sudden pushed into some areas where Hamas has a significant presence of fighters still, because the volume and the intensity of direct fire engagements, RPGs, rockets, we've got mortar footage from recent days, haven't had that for quite a while. And then, of course, IEDs on top of all of that is really spiking. So, we've seen the intensity of IDF operations has slowly increased in recent weeks, and they're pushing further and further into the Gaza Strip. And based off of how Hamas has reacted, it does look like they're starting to push into some rather sensitive areas in terms of Hamas control. Now, the IDF put out a statement saying troops of the Golani Brigade under the command of the 36th Division are operating in the Khan Yunis area of the southern Gaza Strip. They said they located and dismantled an underground terror route in the Khan Yunis area, approximately 500 meters long and 13 meters deep. Over the past week, the troops eliminated dozens of terrorists and dismantled more than 130 terrorist infrastructure sites, both above and below ground, including weapon stockpiles, booby-trapped buildings, observation posts, and launch positions directed at IDF troops. Additionally, following that attack in Beit Hanun a couple days ago that led to the death of 5 Israeli soldiers and the wounding of 14 more, we saw the IDF start to encircle that area with armored vehicles. And we've got some footage and some pictures showing the armored vehicles kind of staging on the outskirts of that area. This also follows what appears to be a significant uptick in IDF airstrikes in the northern portion of the Gaza Strip. So, again, something we were looking for during the first phase of the ground war of IDF against Hamas was that at some point they would push in and Hamas would have nowhere else to go, and it would turn into a pretty nasty close-range fight. That did not happen. It happened at times, but by and large, there were still pockets during the first phase of this war where Hamas could have moved to and avoided direct confrontation with the IDF. It looks like this time around, that's not the route Israel is going. They're going to move into everywhere across the Gaza Strip and force these engagements one way or another, which certainly means more dead Hamas, no doubt, because they're being hunted day in and day out. It also, as we've already started to see, is likely going to result in more Israeli casualties as this fight continues. But that's all we've got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.